Welcome back to Information Management Online. This week we are starting the first of a 2-week lecture on if functions. If functions are, well, A, very exciting, and B, they're a little involved, a little complex. So we're going to split this into 2 weeks. The first week, right now, we're going to talk about just regular if functions, talk about what they are very basically. And then next week, we're going to look at different types of if functions. So let's just dive in. It's going to be great. If functions, an excellent adventure. I don't know if you see what I did there, but it's a hilarious Excel pun. Okay, so when we talk about if functions, we're talking about these things that are just like real life if statements. You use the word if all the time, so you know what an if statement is. Here are some if statements that you might come across in your daily life. If you do your homework, you'll probably pass this class. Otherwise, you'll probably fail, right? If you do this, here's what'll happen. If you don't do it, here's the other thing that'll happen. If you get 8 hours of sleep, you'll feel well rested. Otherwise, you'll fall asleep in class. If you like horrible acting, you'll like the Netflix show Iron Fist. Burn, Iron Fist. Otherwise, you'll hate it. Okay, so if statements, we see these all the time. So you understand what an if statement is. If this, then that, otherwise not. So we can do the same sort of thing in Excel. And you might be asking yourself, well, why would we do that in Excel? And that's a very good question. And I want you to hold on to that question until the end of this. First, I'm going to talk to you about how we formulate if functions, and then we'll talk about how we can use them. So here is the if formula. You know that in Excel, every time you want Excel to do some sort of math or some sort of work, you have to put in a formula, right? And formulas start with equal signs. The if formula is no exception. So this is the if formula. So far, we've been working with formulas like sum, right? It would be equals sum, open parentheses, and you click on all the cells you want to add together, then close parentheses, or equals average, open parentheses, all the numbers you want to average, close parentheses. This is similar, except now we're looking at the version of it that has words. So the if formula is this, equals if, equals if. Very easy. Open parentheses. And then there are 3 components inside the parentheses. Logical test, value if true, value if false. And we're going to run through what each of these things means. The logical test for the if function basically means if what. So if you think back to our if statements that we looked at, or if about your homework and about sleep and about Iron Fist, they all started with an if what, right? So if we look at our Iron Fist example, if you like horrible acting, you'll like the Netflix show Iron Fist, otherwise you'll hate it. The if you like horrible acting, that's the if what. Like that's the thing we're trying to logically test. That word test, of course, means we're going to test it out. So what is our logical test here? What are we testing whether or not this exists? In this case, if you like horrible acting, we're trying to figure out if you like horrible acting. Are we testing out whether or not you like horrible acting? So in this example, if you like horrible acting is the if what. Okay. The second part is the value if true. In other words, if the thing that we're testing is true, then what? So if you do like horrible acting, if that's true, if that test is true, then you will like Netflix show Iron Fist. That's the value. So if it's true that you like horrible acting, then you will like Netflix Iron Fist. That's the value. Okay, so logical test, the thing we're trying to find out if it's true or not. Value if true. If it is true, then this. And then the other piece over here is the value if false, which is just if it's not true, right? If it's false, if the logical test is false, then what? In other words, if you don't like horrible acting, then what, right? So what is the value if that test is false? In this case, of course, if you don't like horrible acting, you'll hate it, right? So the value if false here is you'll hate it. So if we look at this, the Excel language, our formula would be again, equals if, open parentheses, logical test, comma, value if true, comma, value if false. If we're writing the question about whether or not you like bad acting, it would be written maybe like this. Equals if, open parentheses, you like bad acting, comma, you'll like the next Netflix show Iron Fist, comma, you'll hate it, right? So if you like bad acting is the test, value if true is you'll like the Netflix show Iron Fist, value if false is you'll hate it, all right? If formulas. If this, then that, otherwise this other thing. But that doesn't make any sense. So here is how we're going to approach this. We are going to, once again, use the magic of the Muppets to help us understand what if functions are all about. So let's get to Excel. Okay, let's say that I came to you and said, hey, which Muppet is your favorite Muppet? And I asked a bunch of people, And here are the results. 26 people said Kermit, 18 people said Miss Piggy, 8 people said Waldorf of Statler and Waldorf fame, 6 people said Pepe the King Prawn, 20 people said Swedish Chef, 4 said Rolf, 1 said Janice, poor Janice, and 17 said Fozzie. So I want to know then which of these are top rated, which ones are not top rated. So I made a column called top rated, ? And I want this column to say whether or not each Muppet is a, quote, top rated Muppet. And I think we're going to say any Muppet that has more than 10 ratings or more than 10 votes is going to be a top rated Muppet. And so what I want in this column is I want this to say yes if the Muppet is top rated, and I want it to say no if the Muppet is not top rated. And I'm going to do this using an if function. So here's my if statement equals if, okay, open parentheses. Now my logical test is going to be, is Kermit's rating greater than 10, right? But I have to think about how I'm going to write this because I have to write it in a language that Excel is going to understand. So I want to know if this Muppet, whoever this is, in this case Kermit, has a rating higher than 10. So what I'm really wanting to find out is if this rating, if this number here is greater than 10, right? That's what I'm testing. So if this number in cell B2 is, I'm going to make a greater than sign, is greater than 10, okay, and that's my test. I'm going to use a comma, and that's it. So all I'm testing with this if function is if this number, whatever's in this cell, is greater than 10. Next is value if true. If it's true that whatever's in here is greater than 10, then it is a top-rated Muppet, right? So then I want this to say yes. And I'm putting yes in quotation marks because when you use formulas in Excel, if you don't put quotation marks around words, they won't show up. I'll show you what I mean in just a second, but bear with me for right now. I want it to say the word yes, so I'm telling Excel, hey, these letters that show up between these quotation marks, these are the ones you put into this cell. So I want it to say yes, and then comma, and then value if false. If it's false, if B2 does not equal greater than 10, then I want this to say no, right? So I'm going to type quotation marks, no. And I'm going to close it up. So here's my formula. Equals if, open parentheses, this number, B2, is greater than 10, then yes, otherwise no. And when I hit enter, I get yes here. So what's happening is Excel is looking at this function and saying, well, 26 is greater than 10, so it's true. So the value here is going to be yes. And if I copy this down, my Miss Piggy should also say yes, right? Boop. And if we look, it moved all my formulas down, so it's equals if, open parentheses, now, B3 greater than 10. Is 18 greater than 10? Yes. Excel knows that, so it's putting yes in here. For the next one, if I copy it down, it's no. Because Excel is doing this test. It's saying, is this number greater than 10? In this case, no, it's not. So this before greater than 10 is false. Not true, right? So since it's false, it's going to put in the value if false, which in this case is no. We can copy and paste this all the way down. Bloop. So we're using if functions to put something in this column based on whether or not our logical test is true. So and I told you I would do this. If you take out the parentheses here, you'll get an error. So if you ever see an error like this, there usually are some really easy explanations of why you have this error. One of them might be you're trying to put a word in, you didn't put it in quotation marks. If you just take out the quotation marks, then Excel is trying to read YES as some sort of formula function, and it's not a formula function, right? It's a word that you want to show. So when you put it in quotation marks, just like this, boop. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to zero this out, right? I'm going to put this spreadsheet up in Canvas so you can just play around with it. And you don't have homework for this week. I want you, though, to play around with this and just get a little comfortable with if functions, because next week we're going to do a lot more with them. We're going to do 5 or 6, I think, different types of if functions, not just equals if, open parentheses, whatever, but several different versions of that. So no homework, nothing to turn in this week. We'll do a lot of work next week, but do download this spreadsheet and just at a very minimum, just do what I did, right? Equals if, open parentheses, and then do a logical test and finish your if functions. Just make sure that you get some practice doing that, okay? If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll be here next week.